when Loretta enrolled in Ravenwood High. She never anticipated becoming entangled in the school's most chilling rumor, one that involved a piano. The building was old, with creaking halls and stained glass windows that bathed corridors in hazy colors at dusk. During her first week, she heard whispers about the piano that plays itself in the middle of the night. Many students rolled their eyes at the mention, dismissing it as yet another ghost story among the countless local tales of haunted instruments, mysterious footprints, and ghoulish apparitions. But the way some teachers tensed at its mention, and the way older students abruptly changed the subject whenever the old piano arose, hinted at something deeper. Loretta was curious. She'd grown up in a town with hardly any legends, so Ravenwood's swirl of stories intrigued her. After all, the school was built in the 1950s, expanded in the 1970s, and had survived a disastrous fire in 1984. It made sense that its battered halls would spawn ghostly folklore. But a piano that played on its own, and each melody supposedly unveiling a hidden chapter of the school's past, was more specific, more visceral than typical rumors. She brushed it off until she witnessed the first odd happening one evening. While heading to drama rehearsal after hours, she passed the music room. The door was locked, lights off, yet she heard faint piano notes drifting out, slow and hesitant, as if someone was practicing an unfamiliar piece. She rattled the doorknob, found it secured. Peeking through the small window, she saw no one inside, but the melody continued. Goosebumps pricked her arms. She walked away quickly, heart pounding. That night, she couldn't sleep, replaying those unearthly piano notes in her head. The next morning, she confided in her friend Bryce, a dedicated band student. He gave her a spooked look and said, "The piano? Don't go near it. It's not a joke." Loretta, which only fed her curiosity more. Ravenwood's music wing was a cluster of practice rooms, an instrument storage closet, and one large ensemble room with a stage. The rumored haunted piano apparently resided in that ensemble space, behind a heavy curtain. According to Bryce, it was an upright piano older than the school itself, rumored to have come from a church that burned down decades earlier. Over the years, students reported hearing it play random tunes after midnight, sometimes haunting waltzes, other times disjointed scales. No culprit was ever found. The staff quietly brushed it aside, just squeaky air vents, they'd say, but never explained how air vents imitated a real piano's resonance. Loretta hovered near the music wing between classes, eavesdropping on older students. She picked up fragments. "I heard once that it played for Elise at 3 a.m. And the next day the principal resigned." Another claimed it performed a ragtime piece right before a janitor had a freak accident. Legends swelled around this instrument, some comedic, some terrifying. Yet no one had proof, only rumors layered with exaggeration. One day, a timid clarinet player, Lucy, confided in Loretta that she'd glimpsed the piano keys moving by themselves once when she arrived early for band practice. Lucy insisted no one else was in the room. She fled, spooked, and refused to mention it further. Another band student said the instrument sometimes changed positions overnight, sliding away from the wall, as if it had been used. The caretaker swore he never moved it. Whenever Loretta pressed for details, she got sidelong glances, half-laughed warnings, but her curiosity brimmed. If the piano truly played alone, maybe she could record it, unravel its secrets. Bryce warned her that many had tried and failed to capture the phenomenon on camera devices malfunctioned. Audio recordings turned into static. Still, Loretta wanted to see for herself, to know if it was real or just teenage group hysteria. The deeper Loretta dug, the more the piano's legend seemed tied to Ravenwood's darkest chapters. She combed through yearbooks from decades past. A cryptic mention in a 1972 edition read, "In memory of those lost." The music lingers. She found an old mention in the local newspaper archives about a student, Carl Hammond, who died under mysterious circumstances at a school recital in 1974. The article was sparse, just noting an accident involving the stage and a piano. Another snippet from 1984 referenced damage to the music wing during a catastrophic fire that left part of the school closed for months. Whispers among teachers suggested the old piano had been salvaged from that fire, though how it survived the blaze was unclear. Some believe the instrument was cursed by the tragedies that occurred near it, Carl's death, or the many rumored accidents that followed. Each tragedy apparently was accompanied by unearthly piano music echoing in corridors, as if the instrument itself lamented or warned of further doom. Loretta realized the piano songs might be revealing truths about these events. The legend said each tune unmasked the secret of the school, like a musical confession. Could the chord progressions or the choice of melody be connected to who was involved in the old tragedy? This notion enthralled her, a piano that served as a haunting narrator of Ravenwood's hidden sins. Bryce, though spooked, helped her gather documents from the music department's dusty file cabinets. They found references to an annual winter recital that ended abruptly in 1974 after the accident. No official cause stated, just canceled mid-year. They also discovered a cryptic note from a former principal indicating the old upright must remain locked, per board directive, but the reason wasn't spelled out. Strange indeed. Emboldened by these clues, Loretta hatched a plan. She'd hide in the school overnight to see if the piano truly came alive. She confided in Bryce and coaxed him to join. He reluctantly agreed, provided they took precautions. On a Friday evening, after most staff left, they slipped into the music wing's storage closet. They carried flashlights, phone chargers, snacks, and a digital recorder. Bryce joked half-heartedly, "We'll end up as new ghost stories ourselves," but Loretta's determined gaze told him there was no turning back. Time crawled in the dark. They stifled yawns and tried to ignore the building's eerie hush. Occasionally, footsteps echoed in distant halls, maybe a janitor or a lingering teacher. By 11 p.m., the campus seemed dead. At midnight, the caretaker's final checks echoed down the corridor. Then silence. They waited. Tension mounted. The clock on Bryce's phone ticked past 1 a.m. 2 a.m. Loretta's eyelids drooped. Then, near 2:30 a.m., faint notes drifted in from the ensemble room. A piano melody, soft, melancholic, each chord echoing in the stillness. They locked eyes. Adrenaline surging. It was real. Carefully, they emerged from the closet, creeping down the corridor. The music grew clearer, a haunting waltz, slightly discordant. The ensemble room door was ajar. Through the gap, they glimpsed the old upright piano near the center. Keys moved on their own, pressing down with no visible hands. The dusty bench sat empty. The overhead lights were off, yet the piano gave off a subtle glow. Loretta stifled a gasp, heart pounding in her ears. Bryce raised the digital recorder, pressing record. For a minute, they just listened, mesmerized by the swirling melody. The pattern was complex, sorrowful. Then the tempo quickened, notes clashing in an abrupt crescendo. Loretta sensed an undercurrent of panic in the tune, as though the piano itself was retelling some dreadful memory. She took a step closer, floor creaking. The music ceased instantly. The keys froze mid-press, and the bench gave a tiny scrape against the floor, as if something unseen pushed it aside. With a creak, the piano lid slammed shut. The two teens leaped back. Silence smothered the room. Goosebumps prickled along Loretta's arms. They retreated, locking eyes. Then, with a final, defiant ring, a single key pressed, a low, resonant note that vibrated the still air. They fled down the hall, returning to the storage closet. Their hearts hammered as they replayed the digital recorder, anxious to confirm. The recording was mostly static. Faint piano notes, barely audible, crackled in the background. The clarity was lost, as though an electromagnetic field scrambled the device. Disappointed, Bryce sighed. It's like the thing scrambles any evidence. Loretta, though frustrated, noticed something in the last moments of the recording, an odd glitchy pattern reminiscent of staccato notes. She replayed it, hearing random bursts of sound. She had an idea. What if it's a code or a reverse track? She emailed the audio to her phone, tried reversing it using an editing app. The reversed snippet produced a half-recognizable tune. Could it be the waltz they heard? Backward. Or perhaps a hidden message? As dawn neared, they snuck out of the building, exhausted yet electrified by their discovery. That weekend, Loretta spent hours analyzing the reversed audio, suspecting it might reveal more. She recognized bits of Für Elise, but scrambled, plus other segments that seemed original. Her gut told her the music was telling a story. If only she could decode it. She also pored over the story of Carl Hammond, the student who died in 1974. He was rumored to be a talented pianist. One rumor said he discovered a dark secret about the school's finances or some teacher's wrongdoing. Another rumor said his death on stage was no accident. Could the piano's ghostly melodies be Carl's attempt to reveal the truth? On Monday, Loretta confronted the band teacher, Mr. Owen, who'd been at the school a long time. She pressed him about the old piano, Carl Hammond, and any official records. Mr. Owen grew pale, muttering that students meddling in this always ended up spooked or worse. He admitted the piano was rumored cursed, that teachers had tried relocating it, but it always found its way back. He refused to elaborate, just pleaded with her to stay away. That evening, Bryce texted Loretta that he found references in a staff-only file about a hush-hush incident. The doc implied Carl discovered misappropriation of funds by certain administrators. He threatened to expose them at the winter recital. Then a freak accident with the stage trapdoor claimed his life. Some believed sabotage. The doc concluded with a line, "The old upright is a reminder of that night. Let it remain locked out of respect or fear." Loretta was convinced the piano's hauntings were tied to Carl's unsolved death. Perhaps each piece it played revealed a slice of that scandal or final hours. She decided they must witness a full performance, not just a snippet, to piece the puzzle together. Bryce hesitated. "We almost died of fright last time." But Loretta insisted. If the truth brought closure, maybe the hauntings would end, or Carl's spirit would rest. Bryce relented, half willing, half terrified. They planned a second overnight stakeout. This time, they'd hide in the actual ensemble room, behind stacked chairs in the corner, so they'd be near the piano. If it started playing, they'd remain hidden, allowing the full piece to unfold, capturing it from up close. Slipping into the school at dusk, they prepared carefully multiple recorders, extra phone battery, an external mic, even an old cassette recorder, hoping analog tech might fare better. Nervous jokes aside, tension hung heavy. By midnight, the building was locked. They clutched flashlights, muffling any noise. The hours in the dark ensemble room felt endless. The faint smell of old wood and musty curtains pressed on them. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. The hush became stifling. Then, shortly before 2:30, the temperature dropped drastically. A subtle movement near the piano. Loretta's breath caught as she peered between chairs. Keys depressed by invisible fingers, producing a soft chord. The overhead lights flickered, but no occupant on the bench. The chord repeated, building into a slow, mournful melody, a minor waltz. A hush layered over it, as though the air itself listened. Bryce fumbled to start their recorders. This time, the piano played for longer. Haunting progressions swelled. At moments, it flitted into melodic fragments reminiscent of Beethoven or Chopin, then twisted into something wholly original, sad. Anguished chords that made goosebumps prickle. Loretta pictured a tortured spirit pouring emotions into each note. She dared not move. The entire piece lasted nearly 6 minutes. As it reached a climax, a furious swirl of notes, Loretta swore she glimpsed a spectral shape near the bench, a hazy figure with parted hair, wearing old-style concert attire. The figure's face contorted, tears streaming, before dissolving into the final chord. Then, abruptly, silence. The overhead lamp popped, plunging the room into darkness. The piano's final chord hung in the air like an echo from beyond. Bryce squeezed Loretta's hand, both hearts pounding. The keys slowly lifted, and all was still. They waited, breath held, but no further notes emerged. After a tense minute, they crept out from behind the chairs. The piano stood inert, the temperature rising back to normal. They gathered their gear and fled, hearts hammering. At Bryce's house, they played back their recordings. Again, digital ones were mostly static, but the cassette recorded faintly. The piece was audible, though warbly. Loretta's face lit with hope. She recognized certain chord progressions and jotted them down. Bryce used a small keyboard to replicate the patterns. The middle section repeated a swirling motif reminiscent of funeral marches. The final bars soared into jarring dissonance, as if a cry of frustration or despair. Haunted by the image of that hazy figure, Loretta believed the composition was an emotional retelling of Carl's final moments. She suspected if they deciphered the chord structure, they might glean a message. They tried analyzing chord changes, layering them over rumored facts about Carl's death. The music's tension peaked around the same time the official accident allegedly happened. Each chord might correspond to a letter or name. This was guesswork, but the impetus to unravel it pressed them forward. One chord progression repeated 4 times near the end. Bryce joked it spelled CAGE if taking root notes literally. Another chord spelled FADE. Possibly coincidences, but it gave them chills. Are these words or just random notes? Loretta wondered. Worn from the night, they parted ways. Loretta napped, then resumed analyzing the cassette that afternoon. She found a 10-second portion near the end that stood out, quiet. Staccato notes, reversing them again, as she'd tried before, revealed a ghostly, moaning sound. Then a brief series of 5 notes repeated Bryce. She mapped them to letters, EDCBA, arranging them differently spelled BEADC. Maybe it signified something. The next day, she rummaged the school's archives for references to staff from 1974. She discovered a notation in old yearbooks, Vice Principal B. Eek. That name matched the letters from the reversed chord snippet. Tingles crawled her spine. Was this a clue that Vice Principal Eek orchestrated Carl's accident? No staff rosters listed a full name. Just B. Eek. Possibly short for Bernard Eek? She found a mention that Eek resigned abruptly after the tragedy. The details were murky. Some rumored he was involved in shady dealings. Could the piano be calling out VIII to implicate him? With these leads, Loretta and Bryce confronted the retired principal, Mr. Alden, who occasionally volunteered at the library. They cornered him politely, asked about Eek, about Carl's suspicious demise. Mr. Alden grew grim, eventually relenting that Eek was suspected of embezzling school funds. Carl discovered financial discrepancies, planned to expose Eek during a recital speech. The night of the performance, Carl mysteriously fell through a stage trapdoor that had been tampered with. Eek vanished soon after. Mr. Alden believed the school board hushed it up. No charges were filed. Eek fled. Then the rumors about the piano started. Carl was an adept pianist. His spirit allegedly lingered, channeling rage and sorrow through the instrument. Mr. Alden refused to confirm more. Just told them, "Let sleeping ghosts lie. Child, you can't help the dead by resurrecting their pain." But Loretta felt differently. Perhaps unveiling Eek's role publicly would free Carl's spirit, letting the haunted piano rest. She and Bryce gathered every piece of evidence they had: recordings, court interpretations, old documents, and prepared an article for the school newspaper. If they published the truth, maybe the piano's nightly lament would cease. Yet a sense of foreboding clung. The night before the planned publication, they got locked in at the library. Lights flickered. The caretaker found them stuck. It felt like an omen. Bryce suggested, "Maybe we shouldn't do this. The piano might not want us meddling." Loretta's resolve hardened. No, Carl deserves justice. They decided to stage one last observation, hoping the piano would confirm their findings with a definitive piece. At midnight, 2 days before their story would go live, they set up in the ensemble room again, this time with a plan to question the spirit directly. They pinned up pictures of Carl Hammond, documents about Eek, on the piano's stand. Bryce whispered, "If you can hear us, show us the truth." Around 2 a.m., the temperature plummeted. The instrument came alive, keys pressing in frantic patterns. Loretta and Bryce huddled behind the stands. This time, the music was furious, stormy crescendos, jarring staccatos. The overhead lights popped, submerging them in near darkness. Flickers of spectral light outlined a shape at the bench. The piece soared into a dramatic finale, each chord slamming the air like thunderclaps. Then, mid-dissonance, the shape turned toward them. Loretta glimpsed a young man's anguished face, tears glinting in ephemeral moonlight. A final chord hammered. The shape vanished, leaving a single sustained note echoing like a sob. A swirl of cold wind blasted through the room, scattering the pinned documents. Loretta's phone shorted out. Bryce's face was pale as he whispered, "We have enough. Let's go." But before they could move, the piano lid banged shut with a violent crash, splintering one corner. A rush of intangible energy flung them backward, the door slamming. They scrambled up, hearts raging. Then silence. The piano stood dead still once more. Come dawn, they fled the school, battered but determined. They completed their article, exposing the scandal, naming Eek, tying Carl's suspicious death to that final recital. Their teacher sponsor at the newspaper hesitated to publish it, but after reading their references, he allowed a toned-down version, omitting the supernatural details, focusing on the historical wrongdoing. The following week, the piece circulated. Students buzzed about the shady vice principal from decades ago. Some teachers expressed relief that the truth came out. Others stayed silent. People began leaving flowers near the old upright piano, as if paying respects to Carl. For a few days, the building felt lighter. the rumored nighttime music less frequent. Loretta hoped this signified Carl's spirit was at peace. But then, unexpectedly, new rumors cropped up. A night custodian claimed the piano played a solemn lullaby just after the article's release. Another student claimed to see a faint figure sitting at the bench one morning. Perhaps the ghost wasn't fully appeased, or another hidden secret lingered. Perhaps the illusions of peace were premature. In a final twist, a letter arrived at Loretta's doorstep. No return address. Inside was a single typed line: "We do not disturb the secrets of Ravenwood. Cease your meddling or face the consequences." She stared at it, fear coiling in her gut. Eek? Or another conspirator from the old guard? The piano's revelations might have only scratched the surface of bigger corruption. Loretta, holding the letter, realized their story might not end with the spirit's restful slumber. The haunted piano had many more secrets to convey. She dreaded the possibility that each melody was a puzzle piece in an ongoing chain of tragedies. And if one meddled too far, the piano might unleash more deadly tunes. That night, as she lay awake, thunder crackled. She swore she heard faint piano notes drifting across the courtyard from the locked ensemble room. A hollow, dirge-like tune filled with sorrow. She pressed her hands over her ears, tears stinging, uncertain if the ghostly keys promised redemption or fresh horrors. One thing was clear: the old school's darkest melodies might never truly fall silent, echoing until every hidden sin was exhumed, or until the living themselves became part of its eternal, haunting symphony.